The U.S. military is sending the 82nd Airborne Division, 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, and over 8,000 ground troops toward the Persian Gulf. Every major news outlet is covering the deployment. Every analyst is discussing whether the U.S. can take Kharg Island. Nobody is adequately answering the question that the troops themselves need answered before they get there. What is waiting for them on the other side? Because according to U.S. intelligence assessments, satellite imagery, and open-source footage now circulating from the island itself, Iran has been preparing Kharg Island for a U.S. ground assault for weeks. And the weapon at the center of that preparation is not a missile. It is not artillery. It is not armor. It is a drone that costs approximately $400. And Ukraine has already shown the world exactly how lethal that $400 drone can be against the most sophisticated military in the world. This video is going to walk through exactly what Iran has built on Kharg Island since U.S. strikes hit the island in March, what FPV drones are, and why they specifically threaten the type of operation the 82nd Airborne is trained to conduct. What happened in Ukraine when a similar doctrine was deployed against a helicopter force, and what the comments section of every major military channel covering this story is asking that the mainstream coverage is not answering. Because the people watching these videos are asking the right questions, and those questions deserve a real technical answer. Let us start with what the intelligence picture actually shows on Kharg Island right now. CNN, citing multiple people familiar with U.S. intelligence reporting, confirmed this week that Iran has been laying traps and moving additional military personnel and air defenses to Kharg Island in preparation for a possible U.S. operation. Specifically, Iran has deployed additional shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile systems known as MANPADs to the island. It has laid anti-personnel and anti-armor mines along shorelines and likely amphibious landing zones. It has constructed fortified underground trenches and bunkers visible in satellite imagery, designed to survive initial airstrikes and continue fighting during the ground phase of any invasion. And it has deployed FPV drones. Footage circulating from accounts affiliated with Iranian fighters on the island shows personnel handling first-person view drone systems and fortifying positions specifically designed for the kind of close-range defensive fighting that makes large formation assaults extremely costly. Retired Admiral James Stavridis, the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, told CNN directly, "Iranians are clever and ruthless. They will do everything they can to inflict maximum casualties on U.S. forces, both on the ships at sea and especially once ground troops are anywhere in their sovereign territory." Retired U.S. Brigadier General Steve Anderson described holding the island after any initial seizure as the long pole in the tent. Not taking it, holding it. That distinction is the entire story. Now here is what an FPV drone actually is and why it changes the calculus of a Kharg Island operation in ways that the coverage is not explaining clearly. Stay with me because this is the technical detail that matters most. FPV stands for first-person view. It is a drone piloted in real time by an operator wearing goggles that display a live feed from a camera mounted on the drone itself. The operator sees exactly what the drone sees. They can fly it through windows, around corners, into vehicle hatches, and directly at individual soldiers with a precision that no other guided weapon in this price range can match. In Ukraine, FPV drones cost between $200 and $800 to produce. They carry explosive warheads typically between 200 grams and 1 kilogram. They fly at speeds up to 160 kilometers per hour. And they can be operated by a single person with a controller and a pair of goggles from a concealed position up to 10 kilometers away. Iran is believed to possess FPV drones capable of identifying and targeting individual U.S. personnel and weapon systems in real time. The week reported that Russia may be sharing intelligence, including satellite imagery with Iran, which would significantly enhance the targeting effectiveness of those drones against U.S. positions on the island. Here is the Ukraine Precedent that the Foundation for Defense of Democracies specifically cited in their analysis of the Kharg Island operation. Ukraine used a fiber optic FPV drone to shoot down a Russian K-52 attack helicopter behind Russian lines. The K-52 is one of the most advanced attack helicopters in Russia's inventory, worth approximately $16 million, destroyed by a drone that cost under $1,000. After the helicopter was hit, a second FPV drone was guided to the crash site to finish off the crew. That specific sequence, a drone ambush followed by a drone follow-up strike against survivors, is now documented doctrine in modern asymmetric warfare. The FDD analysis of the Kharg Island operation warned explicitly that Iran might attempt similar ambushes against U.S. helicopters conducting airborne assault operations or resupply missions. Think about what that means operationally. The 82nd Airborne Division conducts parachute assaults and helicopter insertions. Those low-flying helicopters, MV-22 Ospreys, CH-47 Chinooks, UH-60 Blackhawks, are exactly the type of aircraft that fiber optic FPV drones were shown in Ukraine to be capable of killing. And unlike radar-guided missiles that can be jammed or flared away, a fiber optic FPV drone communicates through a physical cable unreachable by electronic warfare. You cannot jam a wire. Retired Brigadier General John Barranco, when discussing the Kharg operation with military analysts, noted that the relatively low-flying aircraft needed to insert troops would be more vulnerable to Iranian surface-to-air threats, and that FPV ambushes represent exactly the kind of asymmetric threat that does not show up cleanly on pre-operation assessments. Now here is the geography dimension that makes all of this significantly worse, and that the viral video on this topic did not adequately address. Kharg Island sits approximately 15 to 20 miles off the Iranian coast. That is not a comfortable buffer. That is close enough for artillery firing rocket-assisted projectiles to reach the island. It is close enough for multiple launch rocket systems on the mainland to saturate the island with unguided fire. And it is close enough for FPV drones launched from the Iranian coast to reach U.S. positions on the island within minutes of launch. The island is 7.7 square miles. At that size, there is essentially no part of it that is out of range from a drone operator on the Iranian coastline opposite. U.S. forces that establish positions on Kharg Island become, in the words of one analyst cited by Newsweek, sitting ducks for Iranian drone and missile strikes. The question that every comment section is asking, but nobody is answering directly, is this. Once the 82nd Airborne lands on Kharg Island, what stops Iran from launching continuous FPV drone swarms from the mainland 20 miles away around the clock until the position becomes untenable? The U.S. military has several potential answers to that question. None of them is simple. Counter-drone systems like the Coyote, the Drone Buster, and the LM-ATIS can jam and intercept FPV drones, but they work best against radio frequency-controlled systems. Fiber optic FPV drones like the ones Ukraine used against the K-52 are immune to radio frequency jamming. Physical intercept using directed energy or kinetic systems can work against individual drones but becomes extremely difficult against swarm tactics where dozens of drones are launched simultaneously from dispersed positions. U.S. forces in Iraq have already encountered exactly this problem. Pravda Germany's military analysis noted that Iran's proxies in Iraq have already been observed operating FPV drones at scale, giving Iranian forces direct combat experience with the doctrine they would employ against U.S. troops on Kharg Island. The MANPADs problem adds another layer. Shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles like the Eagle and Strela variants that Iran has deployed to the island are heat-seeking and can engage helicopters and low-flying fixed-wing aircraft at ranges up to 6 kilometers. Combined with FPV drones for low-altitude threats, they create a defensive envelope around the island that makes air assault and resupply operations significantly more dangerous than a conventional landing against a similar-sized force without those systems. There is one strategic dynamic that has received almost no attention in the mainstream coverage, and that changes the threat picture in a specific and important way. If Iran attacks Kharg Island's oil infrastructure with its own missiles and drones after a U.S. occupation, it destroys the economic lifeline it is trying to protect. The oil facilities on Kharg represent 57% of Iran's total export revenue. Iran would essentially be burning its own money to kill American troops. This creates a specific deterrent that analysts at the Defense News described this week. Once U.S. forces occupy the island, Iran's calculus shifts from destroy the occupiers to find ways to dislodge them without destroying the infrastructure beneath them. That constraint actually works in the favor of U.S. forces holding the island because it limits the types of weapons Iran can use freely. Iran cannot carpet bomb an island it needs to sell oil from. What it can do is conduct sustained precision attacks against U.S. personnel specifically, using drones small enough and precise enough to target soldiers without destroying the infrastructure they are standing next to. That is not a reassuring constraint. It is the operating environment in which the 82nd Airborne would be holding that position. Here is what the expectations were before this week, and what the intelligence picture now shows. The expectation was that U.S. airstrikes on Kharg Island's military infrastructure earlier in March had degraded Iranian defensive capability enough to make a ground operation viable. The reality is that Iran has spent the weeks since those strikes specifically rebuilding its defensive posture with the systems most difficult for conventional U.S. forces to counter, specifically MANPADs, mines, and FPV drones. The expectation was that Iran's primary defensive threat to U.S. ground forces would come from conventional weapons like missiles and artillery that American air power can locate and suppress. The reality is that FPV drones launched from the Iranian mainland 20 miles away are controlled through fiber optic cables immune to electronic warfare, cost $400 each, and have already been proven capable of destroying helicopters worth $16 million in Ukraine. The expectation was that taking Kharg Island quickly would be the hard part, and holding it would follow. The reality is that every serious military analyst cited this week said the opposite. Taking it is the easy part. Holding it against sustained low-cost drone attrition from the mainland is the long pole in the tent. Retired Admiral Stavridis said Iranians are clever and ruthless. The $400 drone sitting in a trench on Kharg Island right now is evidence of both. The question American citizens should be asking their government is not whether U.S. forces can take the island. They almost certainly can. The question is what the plan is for the day after. Because that is the question that does not have a public answer yet. Drop your assessment in the comments. Can U.S. counter-drone systems handle sustained FPV swarms from the Iranian mainland? This is Global Conflicts Dispatch. Subscribe. Back tomorrow.